Good day to you. My name is Tatjana Braun and I am a program curator at the Goethe-Institut in Montreal, and I am very happy to welcome you on behalf of the Goethe-Institut and our local project partners Never Apart to today's virtual walking tour and project presentation of Missing Black Technofossil Here, an interactive project by Canadian multidisciplinary artist, activist and visual griot Quentin VerCetty. This event is part of Shaping the Past, a partnership between Monument Lab, the Goethe-Institut and the German Federal Agency for Civic Education, BPB, and is presented within the framework of Memory Month, a series of program highlighting and discussing ongoing critical memory interventions in sites and spaces, and in particular monuments in North America and Germany. Now, before presenting today's program and protagonists, I am very honored and grateful to welcome Laurie Rose Dauphine, otherwise known by her artist name Elo. She's a Montreal-based multidisciplinary artist, singer, performer, and spiritual guide. Her song and prayer will set the tone and open the doors for today's event and discussion.
M'a annoncé 4 directions yo. M'a annoncé 4 éléments yo. Pas pouvoir grand mettre là, pas pouvoir ça ni pas ouais yo. M'a annoncé toute nation l'Afrique guinéenne. Pas pouvoir grand mettre là, pas pouvoir ça ni pas ouais yo. M'a annoncé toute nation premiers ancêtres l'Amérique yo. Grâce la délivrance. Grâce la délivrance. Grâce la délivrance pour les morts. Grâce la délivrance pour la terre. Grâce la délivrance pour le ciel. Grâce à mon Dieu, grâce à mon Dieu, grâce à mon Dieu, Saluer, les mamans saluer. Saluer, les mamans saluer. Saluer, papa les païens. Saluer, papa les païens. Non ditation. Saluer, papa les païens. C'est beau, maman la soirée. Saluer, les mamans saluer. Saluer, les mamans saluer. Saluer, papa les païens. Saluer, papa les païens. Saluer, papa les païens. Ouvri porte là pour moi, c'est bon les bas. Ouvri porte là, souffle. Ouvri porte là pour moi, papa. Comme ça passer. Ouvri porte là pour moi, papa. Comme ça passer. La mouille vers les bas, ma mère, mais c'est bon. La nuit vers les bas. La jeune guérison anti-bon. La nuit vers les bas. La jeune abondance anti-bon. La nuit vers les bas. La nuit vers les bas, ma valeur me fait loyau. La nuit vers les bas, ma valeur me fait loyau. La nuit vers les bas, ma valeur me fait loyau. Aïe bobo pour dîner, aïe bobo pour la vie. Voilà quoi pour les morts. Aïe bobo, aïe bobo, aïe bobo.
Merci beaucoup, Laurie Rose Dauphine, for this beautiful opening performance and blessing. Before presenting today's program, I'd like to take the chance and thank our local partners Never Apart, a non-profit organization, gallery and project space in Montreal determined to bring about social change and spiritual awareness through art, culture and music events. After a short introduction by Paul Farber, director of the Monument Lab in Philadelphia, we are going to follow Quentin VerCetty as he guides us across downtown and old Montreal on a tour to different monuments and places of remembrance he has chosen to highlight and discuss. After the audiovisual tour, you'll have the possibility to interact and ask all of your questions in a little Q&A with the artist. You'll find the Q&A button down on your Zoom screen, but I'll explain that later again. Quentin VerCetty's project, Missing Black Technofossil Here, looks at the absent, erased and untold memories and stories of Black African Canadians whose stories and data are not visible in Montreal's public space and monuments. Quentin VerCetty is an award-winning multidisciplinary artist, activist and scholar and visual storyteller. He's a graduate student at Concordia University and the co-founder and director of the Black Speculative Arts Movement, a network of creatives, intellectuals, and artists that provides new, inclusive, and intersectional perspectives to reimagine public spaces. Quentin VerCetty's research and practice uses speculative narratives like Afrofuturism to address issues of representation, immigration, and decolonization. He's currently working on a book, Exported Pollen from Mercury, Tales and Parables from a Life Growth, and has just recently won a Toronto Public Art competition to create a sculpture honoring the memory of abolitionist and former slave Joshua Glover. Now, before starting the tour, a video greeting by Paul Farber.
Good day and welcome to Quentin VerCetty's virtual walking tour and a look at his powerful and brilliant project, Missing Black Technofossil Here. I'm Paul Farber. I'm director and co-founder of Monument Lab. We're a public art and history studio based in Philadelphia, and we have partnered with the Goethe-Institut and the BPB on a project called Shaping the Past, which is an initiative to reflect upon and intervene into the questions of who, what, and how do we remember in public spaces. Quentin is one of nearly 20 artists, activists, designers from the Monument Lab Transnational Fellows Program across Canada, the US, Mexico, Germany, and other diasporic connections who have been investigating, exploring, and unpacking the various ways that we think about and practice monumentality. I met Quentin for the first time last year in Toronto under the Bentway. He was a participating artist in the project New Monuments for New Cities, and I was blown away the day that I met Quentin and heard him talk about his work, his research practice as a scholar, and the way as an artist he was connecting memory and action today. Our conversations have evolved over the last year, and continually I learn in every moment in seeing history and memory through his eyes, his perspective, his words. And today on this virtual walking tour, I have no doubt that similarly you'll be taken on a path of discovery, of critical questioning, and new possibility. When we look back at this moment of monument reckoning and reimagining, Quentin VerCetty is one of those people that we will see as having guided us through some of the most challenging and yet important conversations that we can have across our societies. How do we bring the past forward? How do we not think about the past as isolated from the present? And how do we look to stories of resistance, justice, and hope to move us forward? So please enjoy this event. Thank you to the Goethe-Institut, to the BPB, and of course, to the brilliant artist Quentin VerCetty.
Thanks a lot, Paul Farber, for your very kind words and appreciation. After the audiovisual tour, we'll virtually reconvene at the Goethe-Institut, and you'll be invited to engage and discuss the project with the artist. To inspire your thoughts and open up the Q&A, we have prepared a little poll that we will ask you to take, and that will be the basis for our discussion. Of course, your participation is optional, but we would love to take this chance to engage and interact with the project and the artist. To create a more personal atmosphere, we'd like to give you the option to open your mics and cameras, to give your feedback, share your thoughts, ask your questions about the project directly, if you like. Please bear in mind that this event is being recorded and will be made publicly accessible over our channels afterwards. So this is only optional. And now, without further ado, let's go walking.
Greetings, bonjour, and wagwan, everybody. You are hearing my voice and you are seeing what this virtual walking tour will be like of the missing Black technofossils here. I'd first like to give thanks to the elder who opened this space, and I would like to give thanks to the Goethe-Institut along with the Monument Lab, and I would like to give thanks to the Most High and to my ancestors as well, and this is in no particular order. But then lastly, I would like to give thanks to all of you who are here. You could be anywhere, but you are here right now with me virtually, and I am excited about it. And so we start from the Goethe-Institut, and on our first stop, we are going to be checking out a historical monument and site. And so I want to speak to you real quick and just explain to you what this project's all about, because there's so many parts to it, there's so many elements to it, and there's so much to speak about, which is why we're having this unconference event. But essentially, this project is about speaking about the absence of Black representation, the absence and the missing stories. And so I look at monuments as technofossils, and technofossil is a term that is in relation to the Anthropocene, and the Anthropocene is essentially a term used to define how humans have affected the earth. And so technofossil is any human-made artifact made out of any non-natural or human-manipulated materials that will exist beyond a natural human's lifespan. And examples of this is including cement, alloy metals, and plastics. The term also refers to the remains or preservation of technology for the future. When this term was first proposed, we referred to cell phones and electrical devices and electrical technologies that stores data and information. And the idea was a cell phone doesn't decompose. And in 1,000 years from now, someone might be able to find your cell phone and will learn and know everything about you and will understand bits and pieces of your stories because your cell phone contains so much information and it's a story essentially. And so I'm looking at monuments in the same exact way. Monuments are time capsules. They are fossils. They are technologies that were created to store information. In my understanding of where human civilization came from, and one of the earliest and greatest examples of a civilization that preserved information for the next generation was the ancient Kemet, which is now modern day Egypt. And so this is everything from the Great Pyramids to the Sphinx to obelisk. And from my research, I realized a lot of these practices go even further beyond ancient Kemet. And so I realized that monument making and this idea of technofossils has very much been an embedded African practice. Then this leads to a very particular way at looking at Black people's contribution to Canada as a nation and to the world itself as it relates to humanity. And so I wanted to uncover some of these stories and also challenge some of the stories that already exist. And so right now we are arriving at our first stop, which is the notorious Maisonneuve Monument at Place d'Arts.
Maisonneuve statue, made in 1893 by Louis-Philippe Herbert. The statue is a tribute to Paul de Chaumardy, Sieur de Maisonneuve, the proclaimed founder of Montreal. The site is known as a place of arms, but it was initially called the place of trade, and it contained an auction block where countless enslaved people were sold along with wood and hay. At the base of the monument is supposed to be other founding figures of Canada. Still absent are the free contracted Africans like Matthew da Costa and his crew, and later enslaved ones who helped Maisonneuve gain indigenous allies and build what would become known as Montreal. Paul de Chaumardy left the colony of New France and returned to France. He brought along a number of undocumented indigenous and African people to be his slaves. There is more information about this story on blacktechnofossils.com.
One of my main things about this project is that I wanted it to be as interactive as possible. So you're engaging with the already existing histories, the already existing technofossils in society, but then you're also imagineering, you're also speculating, you're also using these tools that I've created in a virtual way to further engage and further interact with public spaces, and it's the hope that this can provoke something. And so I created a platform on and use to help with this ongoing research and ongoing project. But we're going to start off with a basic version, and I want to engage in this space. And so the way that we're going to do that is that I want you to go onto the website, load up the augmented reality piece, or you can download it, and so you can open it directly on your phone. It will only work if your phone is at least a 6th generation iPhone or a Samsung, one of the newer versions. But even if you can't, you can still play around with a 3D with a 3D version object in the web page. But essentially, to make it work, is you're going to click this button at the bottom of your browser, and it will go into AR mode. And AR mode means that you can see the camera working in conjunction with it will have the 3D object in the scene. Now, in order to place the 3D object, you have to first point your camera at a flat surface. It could be the stairs, it could be just in front of the monument, and then that's how you place the AR. It will automatically load. And so at this time, I want you to think critically. If we want to engage with history, where would you place this augmented reality piece in relation to the Maisonneuve monument? So we're going to move on to our next stop, which is not too far from here. We're going to stay a little bit in Old Montreal because there's so much history here. There's so much to learn here. One of the things I want to focus on is, again, being critical about history, being critical about placement, space, and also whose memories are being preserved and whose memory and how are these memories being preserved and where. And so it's really interesting that this really important story and this really important ancestor, their story is literally in a back alley behind a justice building. And to me, that is not justice being served to this memory, to this history. We're approaching this art piece now. And I want you to think about, where would you put this augmented reality piece? If you could essentially, literally tell the government where to put a monument to honor the ancestors who face injustice, just like Marie Joseph Angelique did.
Past. Place Marie-Joseph Angelique. This site was the location where the enslaved African Marie-Joseph Angelique was tried and executed in 1734. In an attempt to flee her enslavement, she set fire and destroyed several buildings in what is now known as Old Montreal. Angelique's story became a symbol of resilience, resistance, and freedom in Canada. However, what is missing is a permanent public tributary. This monument tells the story of the existence of the ancestor Marie-Joseph Angelique and her iconic action against injustice. For more information, please visit blacktechnofossils.ca.
So I know we have a lot of questions percolating from that last stop. And I encourage you to visit the website, email me, post some art pieces of you using the augmented reality art piece, and make some comments, share some hashtags using the hashtag Black Technofossil, and I will try my best to repost and share on my platforms as well, along with the website. But I would love to hear critiques. I would love to hear feedback. I would love to hear thoughts. Where people are putting things, where people are placing things, what are the different leaders that people think needs to be highlighted, etc., etc. So as we move on to this next stop, which will be our last stop on this virtual walking tour, I want to again remind folks that this is about critical mass. And I chose this last stop because I wanted to apply a critical lens to it. It was done by a friend of mine who I spoke extensively with about this project, Dominique Deneri. And essentially, I had an issue with this monument because there's so many representations of Toussaint Louverture in Canada alone. He's actually has 4 monuments in Canada by 4 different artists. And essentially, I felt like this contributes to the idea of erasure because there's taking up space that's happening that doesn't allow for Black Canadian stories to be also represented. And so essentially we're going to switch to the second AR for this piece and for this final stop, because I want people to see some leaders that I believe deserves their own monuments or could be represented in my ancestral technofossil art piece. Because the idea is that this AR, this concept of representing African masqueraders, would represent as many ancestors as possible in my ideal speculative world. And so, first, we're going to look at some information, learn about this space, have a deeper conversation around these leaders.
Toussaint Louverture. was named after the Haitian revolutionist. In the 1800s, it was an open field and known as a gathering place for many blacks, especially Alexander Grant, a free-born black writer, business owner, and abolitionist from New York. He moved to the city in 1830 and became the first black person to advertise in Montreal newspapers. As a spokesperson, he drew large crowds on the site to address the issues of the time. On July 23, 1833, Grant and several other black leaders signed a bill to abolish slavery in British colonies such as Canada. It was passed the year later, on August 1st, 1834. This legacy is a place to celebrate freedom of Black Canadians by a Black Canadian.
Recognize that shaping the past is to forge the future through casting the mold of the present, which you are doing right now. Missing Black Technofossils Here looks at absent, erased, and not yet told memories and narratives of Black African Canadians that is not publicly accessible. But together, we can recover some of these unveiled data.
Born in 1589, Matthew de Costa was a hired member and translator of the exploring party of Samuel de Champlain that traveled from France to the New World in the early 17th century. He was the first recorded Black free person to arrive on the territory of today's Canada. Currently, a public technofossil that illustrates and illuminates this data does not exist. There are no permanent fixtures that capsules the memory, story, and achievement to honor the work and life of an ancestor such as Matthew de Costa.
The past is a mold for the present.
Born in 1957, the Right and Honorable Michelle Jean is the first Black Governor General and the 27th Commander-in-Chief of Canada from 2006 to 2010. She is an advocate for Black and Indigenous rights as an avid supporter for the arts and culture as a catalyst for social change. Despite Michelle Jean's achievements, there are no permanent fixtures to honor her as a living ancestor, whose story and achievements speak to her contribution to Canadian and world history.
The present and the past forges the possibility of materiality for the future.
With a passion for social change, Pharaoh Hamid Freeman is the founder of the One Full Circle organization. OFC is a network of over 15,000 people to connect and unite Black Anglophone and Francophone communities as well as businesses. In the future, we hope that there will be a public technofossil or permanent fixture that capsules and illustrates the impact that Freeman has had as a living ancestor on the communities he comes into contact with.
So I hope you enjoyed this experience. Learn about some new ancestors. Learn about new histories, new stories, forgotten, not yet known, maybe known and just disregarded. And I hope this means something to you. And I hope you share this experience with others. I hope you retain this information. And I know I'm full of hope. But essentially, if you have any questions, if you have any comments, again, I want to encourage you to check out the website, Black Technofossils, and engage with the form that's on there to share your feedback, your thoughts, your pictures, your images, or you can use hashtag Black Technofossils and share online. We will try our best to follow the algorithm to to share your work on mass scales and platforms. But again, I want to give thanks to Goethe-Institut, to Monument Lab, to the ancestors, to the Most High, and to all of you who are out there who engage with this art piece. I am looking forward to hearing more questions from y'all. And if you don't have any questions, I got questions for y'all.
So, thanks a lot, Quentin, for this walk. Yeah, you said you got a lot of questions for us. So,
Absolutely.
Yeah. So let's.
So for those who are here, so once again, thank you for this opportunity. Thank you to Paul for the kind words. Thank you to Laurie for the opening once again. And thank you all for being here. And for me, I didn't want to just talk to people because my events are all about engaging. My events are all about being interactive. And so I had a couple of poll questions that I want to ask y'all. And then myself and you are going to engage in, a little Q&A, and then I can just maybe go in a little bit. But more specifically, I want people to ask questions and learn more about this. Some of the things that have been brought up is bringing this into schools. So if you have questions of how we can bring this into schools, how can we extend this, feel free to ask. And so the first question, if you go to the poll, is, were you ever taught about Matthew da Costa in school growing up? And then the second question is, do you think Montreal does enough to in their infrastructure about the history of early Black settlers of the 1600s? And then the third question is, what could make monuments more inclusive? And then the next question after that is, do you think having more monuments that are inclusive could be a way to help dealing with systemic racism? And the last question is, if the ancestral technofossil monument, so the art piece that I made, the 3D one that you saw, if that was constructed in real life in Montreal, in North Montreal, how many of you would go visit? I'm interested to know. So I'm gonna give y'all a chance to answer those questions, and I believe that the amazing Tatiana has some questions for me while y'all answer that, and we get your results.
Yes, exactly. So yeah, please go ahead. It's like a fun poll thing to get like the questions started. So it's, of course, it's totally optional. You don't have to take the poll, but of course we would very much appreciate it. And yeah, so Quentin, I'm referring a little bit to your last question, and also to the AR monument that we saw. And I was wondering, the AR element shows a two-faced bust, and I was wondering, who is that? What does it represent, and what inspired you to present it that way?
Yeah, absolutely. So I was very blessed and fortunate to go to Africa to multiple times on few occasions, and one of the things I realized is that African masks are not just for decoration as we are taught in Western society. In fact, they are meant to represent ancestral spirits and ancestors in general. And so essentially they are monuments, they are technofossils themselves to those beings who we don't see in the everyday life. And so when a person wears a mask, they are embodying the ancestors. And so the two masks that I referenced, they're actually ceremonial masks that will be worn only for very special and specific performances. And so one is from Ivory Coast, Côte d'Ivoire, and the other one is from the other side of the face is a mask in reference to an airway mask. And I can't pronounce the name, so I don't want to butcher it. But a lot more information about those masks are actually on the website. But essentially, I wanted to represent one in its natural state, in its original state, where it's untouched. So it's like what that actual mask looks like. The real life mask that I'm referencing looks like is exactly how I represented it in the actual monument. And then the second half is kind of a hybrid of that mask. And actually I have one, well, I don't think you can see it, but I have one behind me. One of those masks. It's actually right there in the corner.
Ah,
With
yeah.
the Sankofa, with the Sankofa
We
bird
can
above
see it.
Yeah, they can see it. It's okay.
Yeah.
And so yeah, with those two masks coming together, I wanted to represent the past present, because that culture and that practice is not dead. So the past present mask being one side, and then the other side is this futuristic mask. So how are the different ways that we're honoring our ancestors, and how is that evolving? And so having those together also speaks to this idea of duality, which represents another cultural, African cultural practice of having Siamese mask, which represents the spirit and the flesh. And so again, in my project, I'm representing ancestors who are no longer living in the physical world, and those who are still living. And so that's kind of where that concept kind of came about.
Okay.
I hope that answered your question.
Yes, definitely. It's super interesting. I don't know if the poll, we could go into the polls quickly and see what people answered. And we already have like 2 questions from the public too. So a little to the public, if you'd like to send in questions, you can either type them in the Q&A section, but you can also, if you want to like engage visually and open your mic and camera, you can also raise your hand, and then we'll grant you permission to speak directly.
I would love to see who I'm speaking to. So yeah.
Exactly. So
do you want to share the results of the polls?
Yes, exactly. Let's do that quickly.
Oh, wow.
So.
Okay, so for the first one, 81% of those who are in attendance in this event said they have never, not at all, learned about Matthew DaCosta in school growing up. And I also as well have never learned about Matthew DaCosta. And very interestingly, I learned about Matthew DaCosta through an amazing elder named Aita Sadu. And she has a song about Matthew DaCosta. I actually will share the link. She performed the song at one of my events, and pre-COVID, she was going to actually perform that song at one of these events, but of course she was not able to. But yeah, so that was my first time learning about Matthew DaCosta, and I was like, what? Crazy. So in regards to the second question, do you think Montreal does enough to instruct about the history of early Black settlers of the 1600s? 94% people said no, not at all. There's a lot more to do and learn, and I absolutely agree. And for those who said yes, but they could probably do more, I'm interested to hear from you as well. And for question number 3, what could make monuments more inclusive? 6% said non-representational monuments. 75% said conceive and design more diverse monuments dedicated to important personalities from Black Indigenous communities. And 81% said working more closely with local communities to conceive and design monuments. Amazing. For question number 4, they say, do you think having more monuments that are inclusive could be a way to help dealing with systemic racism? And damn, 50-50. Half of y'all said yes, and then half of y'all said maybe it's just one element amongst others. So that's interesting. I love to hear people share their thoughts on that. So again, we're inviting people to come on camera, and please bear in mind that you are being recorded. And so if you don't want to be on camera, you don't have to, but I would love to hear voices if you're comfortable. But of course, you can also put your questions in the Q&A. So the last question is, from this poll, is if the ancestral technofossil monument concept was constructed in real life in Rivière des Prairies, Pointe aux Trembles, would you go visit? And I'm actually shocked. The reason I picked this location is because when I was living in Montreal, and technically I'm still living in Montreal, people say, yo, that's a no-go zone. Like northern Montreal, like north side of that, like over there, like Tremblay, like people like, yo, the train, like the metro doesn't even go that far. So that's a place that we don't go, you know. And it was a place also I picked because it's actually the residence of some of the early settlers from the 1600s who came with Matthew da Costa and settled in Montreal. So that's there's a lot of history there that's still to be uncovered. So that's why I picked that location. So I'm glad to know that if the city of Montreal would like to commission me to make an art piece, a public art piece, I would love to put it in that neighborhood, in that community, because it is a disenfranchised community. You know, oftentimes when we speak about Black neighborhoods in Montreal, we speak of Côte de Neige or NDG, or we speak about Little Burgundy, but we don't speak about, like, you know, the ones that are outside of the downtown core. And so this is one of those communities, you know, Montreal North, which is like Haitianville, you know, Little Haiti. You know, that's another community that's very disenfranchised, but has a lot of rich history that doesn't even have anything to do with slavery. It's about like the early settlers, like I was mentioning, those who came with Matthew da Costa. So thank you for those who engaged in the poll.
Oh, sorry.
Go ahead.
We already have like a first question that is actually related to what you were saying at the end, from Annalena Grünagel. She's asking how many monuments are in Montreal that represent Black history of Montreal, and how many should be there in your opinion? And are there discussions going on at the moment with the city of Montreal to add monuments? Like, is this a real project that they're working on?
So this is a great question. So again, if you go on the website, blacktechnofossil.com, and if you can just share that with the people, I actually archived all the monuments in Canada. So I'd said there's 15 that exist that I've been able to find. There probably are more sculptural monuments out there that I haven't been able to find. And if there are more that I have not listed, please share them with me. But out of the 15, there is 7 that exist. There's 2 sites in Montreal. Sorry, 3 sites in Montreal. Sorry, that exist. So that is Jackie Robinson, and then the one that I showed on in the walk, which is of Toussaint Louverture at Toussaint Louverture Park in Little Burgundy, and then the third one is at the Haitian Association House, which is, there's actually 6 monuments there, 6 statues there at that site, and it's dedicated to the Haitian Revolution leaders and heroes. And so in regards to conversation, I did put in an application to the city of Montreal to make a monument of Matthew da Costa. And at the time when I put in the request, that was last year, I was told by the city that there is not enough public interest to make this monument. So I'm a person who likes to knock once and then kick after. So I would love for everyone here to help me kick down that door and make it happen. And if it's not for me to make it happen, just to see it happen, because it's a history that's so important. Again, he is the first documented African who is not enslaved in Canada. The first enslaved person came to Canada, came to North America in general, like United States and the Caribbean, in the 1620. Matthew da Costa was in Canada in 1608. So that really changes how we speak about Black history and how we speak about Canadian history, right? Because Matthew da Costa represents world history. So I would love to see a monument dedicated to that, because that again rewrites history and reconstruct ideas around history.
We have another question by Evelyn Charuest that is also linked to monuments today, what to do with already existing monuments and education. She says, "Hi Quentin, first congrats. I'm wondering, in your eyes, what's the best way to engage with monuments of controversial figures? Remove them, modify them, educate?" Like books?
Educate. I'm one who likes the conversation aspect, and so I don't like controversial is subjective in a way, because we can't act like that history didn't happen, you know. And so I think it's important for us to know about those histories, but then not to run away from them, you know. And so I think with like, for example, the John A. McDonald's, the James McGill, et cetera, I think it's more fascinating and more courageous of Canada and more progressive if we make monuments to actually confront those monuments that have problematic history. I think that's more interesting. I think that adds to a conversation, that speaks to a society that doesn't run away from its past. I think that's more intriguing in a lot of ways. And there's so many things that we can keep building on top of that, right? Keep adding to the narrative. I think that's more important, you know. I think we could modify them. That's also interesting, because we do see that happening right now. Every time we take down a monument, or every time there's a monument being taken down, that's a modification, because oftentimes the pedestals of those monuments, which is still a part of the art piece, they still stay erected, you know. And so there's a lot of history that is still having pedestals, and then we just removing the figure of the pedestal, but we're not actually removing the trauma. We're not actually shifting the trauma. We're not actually changing anything. So I think using these monuments that exist and adding new monuments, but creating them as confrontational education conversations is the way to go.
Yeah, thanks a lot for that. We have actually another question that kind of follows up to that. It's from AC Mensa. Is there a certain criteria you would want government or city councils to implement when envisioning the future of monuments across the country?
This is a big question. Thank you, AC Mensa. I wish AC Mensa went on camera and said this. But again, folks, feel free. What is the process? Sorry, if people want to go on camera?
They have to raise their hand.
Okay, so folks, raise your hand. But in terms of criteria that I would want government or city councils to implement, is, yeah, consulting with Black and Indigenous people. Because oftentimes we're not included in this conversation. And I think there needs to be a budget set out by the government itself. Trudeau, what up, you know? I think the government needs to put together a budget, especially right now, because we're in the midst of the UN Decade of African Descent. And so there is funding out there. There's funding out there to create new monuments, create new public art pieces, new public works. So I would love to see the government put that as a priority, because this is beyond, again, the technofossil is beyond one's lifetime, right? So this is not just for today's generation, this is for generations to come. And I think this is an important aspect for the government to invest in. And so the criteria, I think, at the bare bones is consultation with the communities and those who represent those communities.
We actually have a hand raise by Borrells and Freeman.
All right.
Hello, everyone. Can you guys hear me?
We can hear and see you loud and clear.
Bonjour, mon frère.
Bonjour, bonjour. I don't know if I should speak in French because we're talking about Montreal, or I should keep it in English.
You can do both.
I can translate.
Oh, awesome. But it's okay. I will, okay, let's go. You know what? I'm just gonna go in English. So I was wondering about the very last part that Quentin was talking about in terms of actually the fact that we need to maybe call out the government and also ask for more funding, because funding is here, as we can see in Toronto what they did with the new Toronto sign made by an Afrofuturist artist, Danilo, the artist, about the and it was connected to the UN Decade of People of African Descent. But my question was, what would be a process? Would it be more efficient if actually is more like maybe just someone like Monument, like Quentin with an institution like Monument Lab, reaching out to the provincial government of Quebec, or actually more like a lobby, like a black lobby, if I can say like that, that would actually show the government that it's really something that the community wants, instead of maybe just one person or just one institution, but actually first building a very important lobby across provinces, why not, or at least at the Quebec level, to actually show the government that this is something needed. Because sometimes we can make requests, but then maybe if we don't really show that there is a real, a desire from the community, then maybe it's going to be neglected. But yeah, I was just thinking about, my question was that what would be a perfect way to see those desire manifested as soon as possible?
Merci beaucoup, mon frère. So to answer that really simply is, yeah, there's an application process that one has to go through. And usually it has to come from some type of organization. So it is possible for the Goethe-Institut or for Monument Lab to put in that request. But oftentimes the traditional way is that someone has to put up the money. So I think it's different when we're asking the government to put up the money. And so on that process, I am not sure.
Okay.
And that is something I would love to learn more about, how to press the government to cough up some change to make this happen. I actually got contacted by people in Sherbrooke, in Laval and Lachine, and Angoul, and I was like, oh man, like people from all over, Quebec, even in Quebec City, I got contacted, and like, there is interest. But in regards to answer those interests, I think that's something I still have to learn more about. Yeah. Thank you for that question, though, bro.
My pleasure, and thank you for the answer.
Bonne journée.
Bon après.
Actually, concerning this this question, maybe I was wondering, you have been, like, you just won you have been the winning artist for the Toronto public art competition, and you will with your proposal for a monument for remembering Joshua Glover. And maybe, I don't know, maybe you can explain a little bit how that went, because this is like also a process that can happen to to have new monuments in the city.
Yeah, absolutely. So that was again in relations to what I actually just mentioned. We're an organization, the Etobicoke Historical Society. They actually fundraise the money from the community, and they said they wanted to have this tribute to this amazing Black man, Joshua Glover, who serviced this community in so many different ways, and have his story preserved. So they went to the government with money, and then the city of Toronto then turned it into a public competition in order to decide on who would make it. And it was just the idea of like who had the strongest idea, who had the strongest design, and that every person on the jury would then score the submission. And yeah, I was very blessed, very fortunate to win anonymously amongst I believe 8 jury members, which is surreal. Felt like Stephen Curry when he won the MVP award. But anyways, or like the Raptors when they won the championship. But anyways, so that was the process, and then now we're just learning. I'm now learning all the necessary steps to now make that monument an actual materialized work of art.
So we have one last question, I'd say, before you present once again the self-guided tour and the application, what people can do COVID-free by themselves.
Yes.
So the last question is by Yule Burlfinger. I hope I pronounced
Yule, yeah.
Yule Burlfinger. He says, my introverted self doesn't want me to go on camera, but I still want to ask my questions. Where can each of us look for silenced histories? How to unearth them, and how to then make space for these voices to be raised and heard? And what could be a daily practice that helps to shift narratives?
I would say it starts with the elders, you know. For me, learning who are the elders in any community, the elders in the Black community is essential. For me, even before I moved to Montreal, I had to do my due diligence of checking in and learning about who are some foundational people in that community, you know, and that's how I came across Pharaoh Freeman. That's how I came across Laurie, who did the libation ceremony, you know, and yeah, there was so many elders who I was introduced to, you know, Michael Faracas, for example, Dorothy Williams, you know, and the list goes on. Pascal, I know, like, you know, so many elder people, and I learned from them, and that was my due diligence. And from them, I asked them, like, what are, like, you know, I just asked them about the history of Montreal, and like what are some things that like people may not know, you know. And so they taught me about, you know, Matthew DeCosta's descendants living in North Montreal, and they taught me about the different neighborhoods, et cetera, and the landscape. And so I would say that is one of the best practices, in my opinion. And this is something that I learned from my Rasta elders in Jamaica, and then something also that was reaffirmed and reinforced in a lot of ways when I went to Africa, specifically when I went to South Africa and to Zimbabwe and to Ghana. Because it's like, yo, you can't just walk up in someone's community and then just think you can be a part of the community, you know? You can't just walk up in a village and think you can join a drum circle or join an event and nobody knows who the hell you are, you know? And so so that's a process for me, I believe, to start looking for the silence histories. And then in regards to unearthing spaces for these voices to be raised and heard, again, I think there's a process of checking in. You know, I think there's a protocol that one should try to find and learn, and that can only happen through communal interactions. And so in regards to daily practice that helps to shift the narratives, I think is checking in with different people, and then learning based on what they taught you, you know, do that due diligence, that next step to do that research, because there's a lot of research out there. There's a lot of documentation that's out there. Montreal has the Bibliothèque has an amazing archive out there. Like one of the best archives in my opinion. Like Toronto Reference Library doesn't have anything on that, like, you know, but yeah, do your due diligence and start researching. You can't just go on YouTube or go on Google, because actually, believe it or not, folks, not everything's on Google. And there's a lot of books on Black Montreal that would astonish you, really. Dorothy Williams, who unfortunately couldn't be here today, actually wrote tons of dissertations and tons of amazing books on the history of Black Montreal. And, you know, I'm super grateful to her and her organization that she used to overlook. Her organization now, DAI, which is the DaCosta Angelique Institute. And that has so much wealth of knowledge. And that for me is like just learning more and more and just meditating on it is an important daily practice for me. I hope that answers.
So we are oh, like we are at the end. I have a very interesting remark by Josiane Poirier, which is more like an information than a question. I will paste that in because this is interesting. It's in French language, but it's very interesting to everybody who wants to hand in project ideas for new monuments. So I'll just paste this in the chat. And yeah, the conversation is not finished. Of course, you can always interact with Quentin VerCetty and his artwork over his website. And yeah, so I would invite you, Quentin, to present us quickly what it looks like, what people can do, because you prepared like the guided tour. The tour that we saw is just a little tiny bit of what you can actually discover in Montreal. Yes, exactly.
All right, yeah. So I'm gonna quickly show y'all the website. It's still under development. So Black Technofossil here, this will be the homepage. And so there's multiple ways that you can actually get to the project. Of course, there's a private description. And yes, this will soon be available in French, but if you have Google Chrome, it will automatically translate to French. You just right click and translate to French. And so one of the ways that you can get to the project is here. You can go to the Google Maps. And so here you can then do the tour. And you just click on the stops. And then you can go to the videos. Like this, like that. As you can see, I highlighted Concordia. And then if you go back to the website, you can then also go straight to the augmented reality. And it takes about 5 seconds to 10 seconds, depending on your internet connection, to load. And so you'll see the bar load here. And then voila. Here it is, the augmented reality. And again, on your phone, you're gonna see a small box that will pop up right here in the corner. You will click that box and then you can go to the AR. And so the second version of the AR, which is down here, which highlights the leaders, that is right here. And so what I suggest to people is first press play to get the audio, and then activate the augmented reality. And so the other thing I want to highlight is there will be an exhibition page where your technofossils would go. And then also you can upload pictures of you using the augmented reality, and I will post them in the exhibition page. And so of course, the other way to get to the project is you just use the browser up above, and you go to project. You can go down, you click that picture right there, and it will take you to the same page. And so now the last thing I want to show you, which again is still under development, is the archives of actual Black technofossils across Canada. So later on this week, the web developer is going to add all 15 monuments onto this page. But if you want to see all the monuments, you can also go to the Facebook page. And you can also upload your technofossils onto the Facebook page as well, and I will post them onto the website. And so you're seeing the back page of this page. But essentially, if you go to this page, you can see all the monuments that exist in Canada, all 15 of them. This is in Nova Scotia. And c'est bon.
Yeah, so thank you very much, Quentin, for this great interview walk, introduction to your important work. I'm extremely excited. I feel blessed to have you in this show. I feel blessed to have had like the beautiful intro by Laurie Rose Dauphine and also by Paul Farber. And I'm pretty excited to go out myself and discover all those monuments and sites and add to the story. And yeah, and thank you all all the people that have participated, for your interesting questions and insights. It's been great. Thanks a lot.
And thank you, Tatiana, for all the work that you've done, and the Goethe-Institut for all the support. Thank you also for being the camera person as well. For folks who didn't know, Tatiana was the one who beautifully modeled her hand to activate the AR for the walk, the virtual walk that we did. So, and thank you everyone for being here. Again, visit the website. If you have any questions, I will answer them to my best of my ability on the website. And yeah, feel free to share with other people to also activate this AR technology and this idea of activating and confronting public spaces.
Thanks a lot.
All right. Stay blessed, everyone.